Alright, so basically what we're going to do now, we're going to put the piston on. I like to leave ride stuff in here just in case, you know, if one of those piston circlip flies off, goes into your crank, then you got to pull the whole motor out, split the cases. I'm not going to say I haven't done that before. But where is my piston? Okay, so I got a new piston here. This is just a stock bore piston. It's actually a Pro X, one of the ones that was made in Japan. So I got a new wrist pin, bearing. Oh, there goes the rings. Wrist pin, bearings, piston, and circlips. Everybody's favorite part about doing piston, the fucking circlips. Anyway. Alright, so what I'm gonna do, obviously, just like any other top end, just gonna throw a circlip on one side, and just in case anyone was wondering, because I'm not gonna call the guy out, but whoever put the last piston in this thing didn't know this. The arrow always points towards the exhaust. Not only that, the taper on a two-stroke piston is tapered towards the intake. Generally, the wider side is the exhaust side. So, to prevent that issue again, we're going to make sure this goes in the right way. I'm going to go ahead and put one of these circlips in. I'm going to pause the video so I can open this package and get all the tools and shit. Alright guys, in this video we're going to finish assembling the top end on this KTM 250. For the most part, there's not really anything different. If you've done any two-stroke before, they're pretty much the same as all the Japanese bikes. The power valve is obviously a little bit different, but other than that, it's pretty easy, straightforward, but I'll walk you guys through it. First thing I'm going to start with is the needle bearing. Like I said, anytime I'm assembling anything in a new top end, I like to put a little bit of oil or assembly lube on it. So I'm just going to use the same oil I've been using for everything else, which is this Klotz Super Techniplate. Just going to put some oil, you know, around the outside and the inside of the needle bearing. Just going to set the needle bearing right in there. Okay, and then here I'm going to show you how to put the piston rings on. So I already installed one of them on right now, but I will show you how to put the next one on. So on piston rings on two strokes, generally they'll have a letter or some kind of marking on them on one side. This one happens to be a T. It's usually just a letter for whatever brand piston ring they are. These are TP or TPR rings. That little letter just needs to face up. So to install these, kind of just set it into the groove here, wherever, it doesn't really matter. Hold that and then just walk it around with your thumb and it'll just snap right into place. Then what you're going to need to do, this doesn't really matter right now while I'm putting it on, but eventually when I put the cylinder on, what you're going to want to do is have the ring end gaps lined up with these pins. So I'm not sure if you can see these pins right here, there and there. Focus, there and there. Just going to line these up right here like that. And then the bottom one, same thing. Line one up there, one up there. That way you can fully compress the rings when you slide the cylinder over it. Alright. I did have one of the piston circlips installed already. I usually do it for the opposite side that I'm working on, so that way I can still slide a wrist pin in from the side I'm working on and throw the last circlip in. So basically what you need to do now is grab your wrist pin. This is another thing I throw some oil on. So I'm just gonna set the piston down real quick so I can oil this. You don't gotta go crazy on it, just get some oil on it. I don't ever like to put anything in dry. Always like a little bit of lube. Alright, again, saw the other video. Whole reason I'm rebuilding this bike is the guy that put this last top end in, really piston in backwards. You put this side towards the front. The broader side goes towards the front, towards the exhaust, which is what this arrow is for right here. that always points toward the exhaust on anything I've ever worked on anyway. The arrow goes towards the front, towards the exhaust. Alright, so wrist pin's oiled up, needle bearings oiled up. Just gonna set this on here like that. Put the round thing in the hole. It'll only go in one way. Just like that. Make sure you push it all the way through so that you have room to put your second circlip in. So that feels like it's bottomed out on the other side. I can see my circlip groove, so we're good. So next, I'm gonna do the circlip. Like I said, I already did the other side. Sometimes these can be kind of a pain in the ass. Let me see if I can get you a little better camera angle for this real quick. All right, so I hope you guys can see a little better. I kind of had to jerry rig a stand for my phone to get you guys in a little straighter and a little closer. Let me grab my circlip. Hopefully this one goes in as easily as the first one did. It's always a little bit more difficult when the piston's actually on the bike. It's always easier, for me anyway, to be holding the piston in my hand while I run this in, but we'll see how this goes. So usually what I like to do is I'll place one end in so that the other end is, let's see if I can get this, just past one of these. So I don't like to leave an end in any of these gaps. So I'll position the first end to where, see how this is now gonna end a little bit beyond that gap. That's perfect, that's the way I like to do it. So I'll just push it in with my thumb as much as I can, and then I'll hold it. And sometimes what I have some good luck with is actually a Schrader valve tool, because you can actually push the circlip like that and it makes it so much easier. It's already in, snapped in, and then you just need to go around and make sure that it's in the groove all the way around. So I usually just feel it with my finger and try to make sure that both ends are fully seated, which they appear to be. So we're good there. That really can't happen too much easier than that. And like I said, this is my little magic trick right here. Schrader valve tool. It's never let me down, as you just saw. Pretty damn effortless. So if you're struggling with circlips, try one of these. If you don't have one, go get one and try it. I promise it makes life so much easier. All right, I'm gonna pull the camera back out further so we can go over installing the rest of the top end, the cylinder and head. That's pretty much it. All right, so I don't know how close that is to the last camera angle I had. Whatever. Next thing we're gonna do, you can pull all this stuff out now. There's really nothing else for me to drop in there at this point. Just be careful not to let this slam against the case or let the piston skirt slam against the rod. Push this one over here. I'm gonna leave that in there. That's the over on the power valve side. But yeah, now basically just make sure your gasket area is clean. I already scraped all this, scrape all the old gasket off, and you're just gonna want to grab your top end cylinder gasket, head gasket, whatever you want to call it. This is a Cometic gasket. I usually prefer OEM, but if not OEM, Cometic makes good gaskets. So, I mean, honestly, at this point, the hardest part was the circlips. Everything else is super easy. If you can turn a wrench, you can do the rest of this on your own. So just slide this over, you know, the studs. Sometimes I like to get hung up on the threads a little bit. Just try not to force it too hard. You don't want to rip the gasket. This one's actually metal, aluminum, but you can still mess it up. There you go. Now you're basically ready to put on your cylinder. I know a lot of guys like to throw some 3-bond or Yama bond or whatever bond you use on here. If your cases and cylinder aren't warped, which they really shouldn't be unless you overheated the shit out of it, You really shouldn't need any of that, especially if you use a good gasket. I've never had an issue with Cometic gaskets. They're usually pretty good. So I'm not going to throw any on. Probably won't have any issues. I don't really know the entire history of this bike, but the cases and the cylinder look pretty damn good to me, so we're going to run with just the gasket. If you want to use some 3-bond or Honda Bond, Yamaha Bond, whatever, by all means go ahead, just don't overdo it. You don't want a bunch of that shit leaking into the water jackets or down onto your crank or anything like that. And, you know, it just looks like shit when you have a bunch of fucking gasket maker sticking out the sides of your cylinder. Anyway, let me grab the cylinder real quick. So the only thing that I kind of need to be mindful of when I'm putting this on is getting the power valve arm through this hole. Other than that, oil up the piston, really good. Wipe some oil around in the cylinder, slide it on. Not much to it. So I have my little cap of oil down here still. So I'm going to set this down, oil this up a little bit. All along the sides, you know, the skirts of the piston, the rings, especially the rings. If anything's going to scratch your cylinder, it's going to be the rings. So, nice little light coat on all sides of the piston. I mean, a little extra oil is not going to hurt. But you don't need to go soaking everything in oil, just a light coat. Have everything slide together a little easier. The rings. Alright, pretty good. I'm gonna wipe all this shit off my hands. I'm gonna actually just use the extra and wipe it along inside the cylinder. This cylinder's already been cleaned. Once you have a cylinder replated, you want to use some brake cleaner or some contact cleaner and wipe out the inside of the bore just to get any, you know, I don't really know what's on it, but you'll get a little bit of black shit off of it, which is, you know, just from them plating and honing it. Just don't want any grit in there, you know. Alright, so that feels pretty good. So, like I said earlier, you gotta be careful, or not really be careful, just pay attention, I guess, to where you have your piston rings. So, you need to have your ring end gaps lined up with these pins. Slippery, you know, they're soaked in oil, but just get them close, and once you squeeze them, they'll go where they need to go. Now, this can be kind of tricky by yourself. You have a set of extra hands that you can use. I would suggest it, just because you got to hold the cylinder and the piston while you're squeezing the piston rings and guiding this cylinder over and through all these obstacles. And you're just gonna try to pinch down. And this is not working out for me because this damn radiator hose in the way. Trying to fight me a little bit. This is where, like I said, extra set of hands can come in handy. Really though, even if you just have someone hold piston for you, because like what just happened to me, I started sliding the cylinder on, actually pushed the piston down to the stroke a little more. A little bit more difficult for me, but hey, it is what it is. Could be a lot worse, could be a 4-stroke. And you have a lot more moving bullshit to work around. The cylinder centered over the piston. I know my head's blocking all this, guys. You can't really see it, but I'm just going to move over to this side just because I'm kind of working on this side anyway, just from the wrong side of the bike. There we go. Gaps look good. So once you have this on, these cables are just kind of in the way here for me, but bring this back up into the stroke Make sure that everything looks good before. Alright. Everything's looking pretty good here. So you just gotta line the studs up, obviously. Pretty good. Everything's lined up. Alright guys, before any of you KTM gurus start bashing me too hard, I know I misspoke already. This hole, for whatever reason, my brain, I was thinking it was for the power valve arm, which looking at it now doesn't even make sense. Obviously, it's for the cylinder stud. Whoops. Oh well, we all make mistakes, cut me a break. Anyway, got everything on over here. This basically just snaps on. I'll show you guys how to do that too. And then there's just a little retaining clip. Let me get all these nuts started for the cylinder studs, and then I'll come back over here and show you guys how to do that. All right, so what you'll have is just this little clip. Yep, that little clip. And if you look on top of this ball, you'll see a hole, and it's actually on the bottom of it as well. You see it right there. All you're gonna do, see if I can do this with one hand here while I hold the camera. Set this pin right here. All right, so all you're gonna do, I'm gonna try to do this here with one hand while I hold the camera, but you're gonna push your power valve plate down, and as long as you didn't adjust anything, you shouldn't have to adjust this rod. But if you do, it's just this little jam nut right here. You break that loose, then you can spin this either way to adjust how high it is. Mine's good, so you're just gonna pop this on like that. All right, and then the little clip is basically just gonna go up. Sorry, trying to do this with one hand here. Is gonna go up into here, okay? So you kind of get it up in there, and then you're just gonna turn this. I don't know if you can see, it's up in that hole. You're just gonna turn this and try to snap it. I don't know if I can do this with my finger. All right, just like that. And it's just gonna sit into that groove, just like that. And really all that's doing is locking, this little pin is locked behind the backside of this ball to keep this rod from popping off. So yeah, it's not going anywhere. That's all it is. I didn't show you guys how to put on these nuts, because if you're watching this video, I'm sure you know how to put on a nut. These are 13 millimeter nuts, and they torque to like 25 foot-pounds or something like that. But unless you have a crowfoot, you're not going to be able to get the nuts, the front two nuts, with a torque wrench. So, I mean, if you've been working on stuff long enough, you should know general idea of what 25 foot-pounds feels like. Just tighten them down, crisscross pattern. So start with this one, go to that one, that one, that one, or whichever. And just make sure they're tight. They don't have to be stupid tight. 25 foot-pounds is not that much. But other than that, all we have left is the covers, the head, and then hooking all the hoses back up, putting some coolant back in it, putting on the gas tank and plastics, and that's pretty much it. But we'll move on and we'll do the covers and the cylinder head right now. In my gasket set, obviously it came with new gaskets for each side. You can tell they're different. This one is for the power valve side, so I'm going to set that down for right now. And there it is. Alright, so there's really nothing to this. Both sides are pretty much the same. Figure out which way this goes, which way it's oriented. So it's going to go like that. You're just going to grab your cover, 3 little Torx screws, and I already scraped all the old gasket off this. Something like that. And I usually like to stick a bolt through just to kind of hold the gasket in place. Like that. and then just figure out which way this is going to go. It can only go one way. Get your first screw started. I can just sit there for a second while I get these other screws. And there's really nothing different about the other side except the rubber gasket or O-ring, whatever you want to call it, for the power valve arm, which I'll show you. I'm not going to replace it. It's in good shape. I don't think that's like a item you need to replace very often. It's not like one of these one-time use paper gaskets or anything like that. So, I mean, I don't even know why I'm showing you this part. This video is probably getting kind of long anyway, so I doubt anybody. I'm sure there's a few of you, but I don't know how many of you are actually watching the entirety of this video. Probably just skipping through to see any of the parts that you might have questions or concerns on, which is fine. I mean, I just kind of put these videos out because I figured, you know, someone might have questions on how to do this, and why not record it while I'm putting it back together. It's not costing me any time or anything. So if you made it this far in the video, right on, appreciate it. Thanks for watching. Let me grab my Torx. Where the fuck did it go? Alright, I found them. So this is what is this? T25 Torx, which are pretty much all the screws. Any Torx screw, not so much the bolts, but screws on this bike, they're going to be probably a T25. So these are just screws, so you don't got to go crazy with them. This isn't a part of the motor that's really sealing anything other than maybe a little bit of oil and vapor that'll get through to the power valve, but you don't got to tighten these super tight or anything. Hand tight is pretty good. And you know, these aren't bolts. They don't have a bolt head on them, just the Torx head, so you don't want to strip them. Don't go too hard on these. They're small. Alright, I'll bring you over to the other side real quick just so I can show you how to, I mean, it's really no different, but I'll show you how to pop on the cover for power valve side. Alright, something I fucked up. Learning moment for both of us, I guess. So there is some good to this video. Don't put this on until you put your gasket on, otherwise you're gonna have to take it off so that you can put your gasket on, because this part down here obviously has to go on, and you can't cut it because then it might not seal right. So just pop this off again. Well, I had to. Hopefully you don't. Hopefully you got to this point of the video before starting working on your own. Put the gasket on and then put that on. Another thing is make sure that this is seated properly in that arm. As you can see, it's fully centered in that groove on all sides. And a little trick is you'll see, this fucking thing will focus. There we go, you can see it now. The top of that clip is sticking out of the top hole. That's how it's supposed to be. That way it creates a barrier all the way up to keep this ball from popping off, basically. That's all it's doing. That's its only job. But yeah, I'm gonna pop this out now. I'm gonna throw this cover on, which is right here. Again, I'm doing this one-handed. Bear with me for a second. And this is the rubber gasket that I was talking about, and it's in good shape. So we're just gonna pop this back on, and there's actually a groove in there that slides over this ridge. So you just make sure that's lined up, which it should be as long as it's seated properly, and push it on, and then throw in your 3 Torx screws, and that's it for the covers. Onto the head. All right, onto the cylinder head. Not a whole lot to it, just make sure it's clean. Make sure there's no nicks or anything like that. Yeah, that's pretty much it. There's not a whole lot to this part. I got a new plug I'm gonna throw in once I get this on. You're just gonna wanna make sure your new O-rings are seated properly in these 2 grooves. So you'll have this inner O-ring that goes right outside the piston or the cylinder wall, and then you'll have this one that actually goes along the outer perimeter, and that's kind of what seals the outside portion of the head. So you just set this on the way it's going to go. line the holes up. Just pulling the hose out of the way a little bit. And just try to make sure, so there's 2 alignment pins. Not sure if you guys saw those right here. Just make sure that these are both in, and there's only one spot that they can really go. Just make sure you line those up, drop it in, and try to make sure while you're doing this that the O-rings are staying in their place. Because sometimes, especially when they're new, they'll be a little tight and they'll want to kind of pop out. So just hold that there. Each bolt is going to get a new copper crush washer. I mean, I've reused old ones before with no issues, but these came in the kit, so why not use them? So I'm just going to thread all these in by hand. And then, again, these are only getting torqued to like 20 foot-pounds, so if you want to torque them, by all means, go ahead and torque them. But again, I pretty much know in my head what 20 foot-pounds feels like, so I'll just make sure they're snug, good and tight, German torque spec. But yeah, I'm gonna throw these in, tighten them down, and then really that's all you have to do. You've pretty much just gone through and seen how the top end on this KTM was rebuilt. Pretty simple. I mean, in all reality, there's not a whole lot of engines that are as simple as a 2-stroke dirt bike. Super easy to work on. That's why I love my 2-strokes. I mean, that's one reason, aside from them just being more fun. I love 2-strokes for those reasons mainly. They're more fun, cheaper, easier to work on. Not a whole lot to rebuild if you blow them up. And like I said, they're cheaper. Cheaper to rebuild for damn sure. And they're easy to get power out of. Figured on my next top end I might go with the 300 kit on this. But yeah, that's enough of me talking. I'm just going to tighten these down and give it a once over, and that'll be it. I don't know how much you guys will want to see me reassemble the bike, but whatever. We'll see how many views this video gets, and then we'll go from there. If it's got some interest, I'll show a video of me putting this thing back together, show it running, all that good stuff. But yeah, thanks again for watching, guys. That's basically it. I'm just going to tighten these down. We'll do a once over, and that'll be it.